Hi, Sadia. How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Doing well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Curated Caregiver. I'm Donna Jackson, the Adult Caregivers Coach. And today we have a wonderful guest, Sadia Abjani from Sage Care. Our topic today is caregiving with pride. Sadia, introduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you, Donna. My name is Sadia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Training and Instructional Design for a project called Sage Care. So Sage Care is housed in an organization called Sage. Sage is the country's largest and oldest organization focused exclusively on LGBTQ plus older adults. It's been around since the 70s, mostly focused in New York, but in the past 30 years or so, it's grown into a national organization that does pretty much anything you can think of when it comes to LGBTQ plus elders. So if they need it, we got it. Sage Care is our cultural competency training and credentialing program. So we credential elder care providers across the continuum of care on how to work with LGBTQ plus older adults. So that's everything from at-home personal caregivers, rehab services, inpatient and outpatient, to independent living, nursing home, assisted living, hospice, and even funeral services.
This is fantastic. When you're in when we're in these spaces and you're looking for resources, you guys, you couldn't ask for a better organization who is focused specifically for our LGBTQ community, for the elders. My
And
goodness.
that's how it was designed. So back in the late 70s, after the Stonewall riots happened, after activism in the LGBT community rose, a group of older adults got together and said, okay, well, who's going to care for us? Right? That was the central question, the central conceit of this whole organization. Who is going to care for us?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think what you're doing is so amazing, creating space around this discussion for LGBTQ plus older adults, because a conversation like this, a question like this, started a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization that has done phenomenal work. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. I genuinely love this organization.
Yeah, gosh. When you come into some very purpose-driven work,
Mhm.
I've heard it said that um, fulfillment is the highest form of compensation. Stuff that you would do for free because it gives your life a level of fulfillment that you can't find sometimes, on a clock getting a
Mhm.
paycheck. And how much greater is it when you can combine the two, right?
Mhm.
I love
Absolutely.
it. Sadia, thank you so much. So let's jump right in. When we met, you were doing a training and just covering all aspects of what it is that you guys do and some of the anecdotal things that happen in this space. Can you share some of the things that, maybe really or everything significant, but might be uh, more significant or things that you see happening in real time with your clientele and how you serve them best?
Oh gosh, that's a pretty large question. So we narrow it down to some of the things that have happened around caregiving, let's say. One of the things we see quite often is that LGBTQ plus individuals, regardless of age, become caregivers at a higher rate.
Yeah.
There's, you know, there aren't huge studies on why this happens. There's small things, small studies that have gotten some information. And because we serve such a large part of the organization, we have a lot of anecdotal data. And what that data tells us is that sometimes it's because LGBT individuals in the family are seen as having more time. Like, oh, you don't have a kid, you can take care of grandma, right? They're non-heterosexual relationships are seen as not as important in some families or not as time consuming. Um, and so LGBT individuals end up being pushed, forced, gently nudged into the caregiving role at a much higher rate. Um, And then we also see that LGBT individuals have a drive and a desire, a determination to care for their chosen family, right? We have a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals who have no biological family or no connection to their biological or legal family. And therefore, it's the community that comes and takes care of one another. Right? So LGBT individuals become caregivers at higher rates for a variety of different reasons. And again, these are generalizations. They're what we see in the field. They're what we get told with the hundreds of thousands of people we work with. There are myriad other reasons, but statistically, a survey of caregivers done in 2021 by the AARP, a survey conducted by the AARP found that 1 in 6 of the heterosexual population became caregivers versus 1 in 5 of the LGBT population. So they become caregivers at a higher rate statistically. We also know that in the LGBT community, whether the individual being cared for is an LGBTQ plus person or the individual providing care is an LGBTQ plus person, but there tends to be some friction, right? Especially where physical decline and cognitive decline become an issue, right? So imagine if you are a transgender person or a transgender child taking care of an older parent or a grandparent, and this individual knew you before you transitioned and knows you now, and in a moment of cognitive decline, they can no longer make the connection between who you are now and who you used to be. Imagine the kind of heartache that that would cause, right? And if there was any kind of struggle around that journey for them, they're reliving that struggle potentially day in and day out. So the need for caregiver support is, I would say, and I would argue, higher in the community, right? When we have a community of individuals that is caring for one another, that feels the desire, the call to care for their own, right? There's this sense of, respite care or support for family caregivers doesn't really come into play for LGBT individuals because they're non-traditional families often, right? So what we see is a community that is called to serve in this way and not a target for a lot of the supports that are available or the respite care available out there because it's not being marketed or targeted to the community.
Man, Sadia, you said so much. I'm jotting notes down. My goodness, so much there. Okay, so let's kind of unpack a couple of things. We talk about having safe spaces, okay? And although you didn't say that word, some of the things you were talking about made me think about how people let me make sure that I'm saying this correctly. Is it proper to say the pride community, or is it more proper to say the LGBTQ plus community?
I think it just depends on the usage.
Okay.
I think you can absolutely say the pride community, but there are many people who have pride who are not LGBT, right? Allies, everyone's included in the pride community. I think when we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, we're specifically talking about individuals who identify as either non-heterosexual, non-heteronormative, or potentially non-cisgender.
That's great. Thank you. And this is a part of what we're doing here. We want to make sure that people are engaging in the most respectful way because they have a little more knowledge, right? Okay. So one of the things you talked about was with the transgender, when you were caring for an elderly loved one and they can't now make the cognitive distinction. Is it okay that we can draw a parallel to a heterosexual sexual person caring for their elderly, and grandma doesn't remember who you are? Forget about that. They don't know that if what sexuality is or how you present. They don't even know who you are. Like, hello, how are you today? Like, would you say that same feeling, that just the brutal heartbreak of it, is experience the same, or do you think that there's an additional layer for that transgender person?
So for that transgender person,
Yeah.
so I, as someone who does not identify as transgender, I can't put myself in someone else's shoes and says this is how an individual feels, right? What
Yeah.
I will say is that um, I know that when I know that when someone cannot say my name correctly, it doesn't hurt the first time, it doesn't hurt the second time, but when I've corrected someone 3 or 4 times, then it starts to be frustrating, right? Then it starts to have that added layer of, do they just not respect me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about that parallel in this example, right? If I, as an individual with dementia or cognitive decline, right, am starting to lose track of who my partner is or lose track of who my daughter is, right? That's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
right? And my daughter can understand or not understand that it's because of the cognitive decline, it's the disease speaking, but it's still heartbreaking.
Yeah.
If my daughter was transgender and I start misgendering her in the process and there was some tension, then I have to imagine that my daughter feels that extra layer of, is this the disease or is this the tension coming back?
Yeah.
Is this the disease? Or at least there's wounds there, there's scabs there that may bleed a little more, right? Because of all the struggle, right?
Yeah.
And I can assume from speaking with individuals who've been in this position and, you know, from my own understanding, having a sibling who is transgender, that the more difficult it is for someone to connect with and accept your identity, the easier those wounds bleed later on. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Man, okay. So we're going to take a detour because I love that your response there. So um gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Gosh. Oh, I know what I wanted to say there. Sadia, as a part of my programming, I have a community of people who come and we just talk about the experience, the caregiving for your elderly loved ones experience. You know, real time, what's going on? Mom didn't know who I was this morning, or dad keeps forgetting to turn the stove off, you know, whatever it is. And a part of my programming is, as you know, I am the adult caregivers coach and I'm certified in that space. I coach people specifically on what you're talking about, the wounds that happen when we are caring for loved ones who may have been our abusers in the past, may have contributed to some trauma in our lives. And now we're at this season of life where we are their designated caregiver. Now what? You come to this with all of those experiences, just as you just so eloquently, you know, said. Now, how do I navigate this? Is this the real them coming out after all these years? This is what they always wanted to say. This is how they always wanted to treat me, right? And how much more in their vulnerable state, how do we now engage with them? And if we are not healed from our trauma, whether they actually perpetrated the trauma upon us or stood by and watched it happen, how do we now navigate this? And so one of my programming arms is coaching people, because you can only go to the next level in your thinking, in your being, head first. There has to be a mind shift. And that's a part of the coaching programs that I have. So it is a tough, tough season for everyone involved. And as you said, there's so many layers. We talk about, and one of the podcasts that I've done in the past was caregiving while Black. Like there are layers to this thing that people who have all of these things that society kind of hoists upon them, whether they agree with these titles and these designations or not. This is how we have been programmed in this society, in these United States. And so that's how we come, that's how we show up. But man, I hope this is helping people just to think through this, to think through what this could look like, and to think through how to prepare. That's a big part of this, right? Preparing for this. Because if we live long enough, we're going to come into this season. We're going to get there. And if we're not prepared, things are going to happen to us, as opposed to us having a plan in place and arrangements made for what we would like to happen. And our team or core around us is informed, and they're not guessing what we want, right?
Yes. So this is a huge, huge topic in the LGBT community, and it's one of my favorite topics to discuss. So it's deeply personal for me. About 2 years ago, my father was in the hospital, and he had nothing organized, nothing planned, and we were pretty sure he wasn't going to make it. And so I've saved the notebook paper where my mom forced a pen into his hand and he was writing out where everything was. And I don't want anyone to experience that. So it's deeply personal for me, and it's incredibly important in the LGBT community to be prepared. So we have an advanced planning toolkit that we use that's useful for everyone, regardless of whether you're LGBT or not. But the advanced planning toolkit is separated into 3 sections: what to do, in the very beginning as you're preparing, what to do when living with a serious illness, and what to do to prepare for end of life, right? So what we find, a couple of things to keep in mind with the LGBT community is that, just because marriage equality happened doesn't mean our older adults are married, right? Many of them may be in long-term relationships that are not legally recognized, either because folks feel like, oh, we're too old for this, even though you're never too old. That's no such thing. Some folks feel like they don't want to participate in an establishment or in a union that didn't want them, right? A lot of them were around or deeply involved in the fight for marriage equality, and that has lasting impacts. And then finally, some of our older adults may lose out on very critical government benefits if they got married and filed taxes jointly, things like that. So quite a few of our LGBTQ plus older adults are not married. And so their next of kin becomes the individual who can make decisions for them. And, just thinking about the complications there are many LGBTQ plus older adults who do not want their next of kin making decisions for them, right? May not have strong relationships with their legal biological family members. And so planning for end of life becomes critical. I'll send you a link to the advanced planning guide, but there's so much in there, right? About and so much in there also about the complications state by state. So it is incredibly difficult to have all of the paperwork in place to ensure that you are making decisions for yourself for as long as possible. For instance, in New York, your will or healthcare proxy, the moment that you pass, can no longer make decisions about your funerary services. That goes back to your next of kin. So you have to have separate paperwork, not just the disposition of bodily remains, but a special New York State piece of paperwork that says that this individual is allowed to make decisions about how I'm buried. So all of these things tend to be incredibly complicated, and there's a hesitation about talking about this, right? We have to, and it's the same hesitation that comes up for a lot of people when we talk about aging in general. In order to critically interact with older adults and with aging and with ageism, we first have to confront the fact that we are also aging, right? The fact that we are, marching closer to whatever comes, right? The fact that we are, going to be in the shoes of the individuals that we're talking about. And that's difficult for many people to face. And it's that same difficulty that comes into play when we think of end of life. But the best thing that we can do for ourselves, and the best thing that we can do for our caregivers, our family members, our chosen family, for the world around us, I would argue, is to ensure that we are making all of those decisions, signing all of that paperwork, ensuring that the individual we want making decisions for us is able to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. If we need to normalize this as a critical part of life, we wouldn't talk to our children about, college in their senior year of high school. Like, you would be preparing for it, because in the normal course of things, if nothing goes terribly wrong, you're gonna progress to that point. Now, whether you want to go to college or not, now that's a different story. But that's the conversation that you're gonna have, not at the day after graduation of high school. Do you want to go to college? Oh, so why we wait, to your point, it's really psychological. It's society driven. It's facing the reality. But I've heard it said that to avoid the inevitable is to be naive. Like, this is going to happen one way, shape, or in one way, shape, or form. It's going to happen. And the more scary scenario is if there is a sudden incident. Right? Now, normal aging, people just, come on, the writing's on the wall. Let's go here. And that's even troublesome and problematic for most people to just wrap their minds around it. But what if, someone takes a fall, a freak accident or whatever, boom, and now you are not even able to communicate out your wishes. It's trauma on top of trauma, really. And, in some of the other podcasts that we've done, we talk about beginning this as early as college. Because in a lot of states, just as you mentioned, New York, and the individual laws that apply in each different state, when you reach age of majority, 18, you say if you are in college and your parents are paying for your college education, if something were to happen to you, your parents are no longer responsible for you in this legal case, in this legal instance. So if you don't have a plan in place, something can happen to an 18-year-old. And the courts, the medical professionals, everybody are looking to, what documents do you have in place? And the majority of people not even close to thinking about having a medical directive, an advance will, a living will, an advance directive, none of this stuff, or just a regular will in place at 18 years of age. So if we start to normalize it, and it's going to take time because this is generational. And as we begin to live longer, this will just kind of fold in. But there's going to be a lot of missed opportunities, let's put it like that, until we get to that point in society where this is kind of baked in. Let's talk about something else that you mentioned. I guess I mentioned it. When we talk about a safe place, especially for our elderly LGBTQ plus community, is the usage of pronouns, is that relatively new, or has that been around a long time and it's just now kind of being more publicized and noticed and accepted and utilized?
Okay, so pronouns have been around since the advent of language. But
no, I know that. I know that. I know.
I know. I'm just joking. But what you're talking about is the use of pronouns like they, them, or neopronouns, right? Like ze, zir, those things. So they have been around in different languages and different cultures for quite a while, right? Transgender people are not new. They've been around since the birth of humanity. There have been trans people in ancient history, trans people in all of our different ancient kingdoms. Trans individuals have existed for as long as people have existed. So language has shifted. The way that we refer to individuals without gender has shifted. Some version of gender neutrality or in language has existed for as long as language has existed, right? Now, it's easier in different cultures because language isn't gendered in certain cultures, right? In certain countries, certain languages we speak, not gendered. So I think what you're trying to say is our current kind of version, the current way that we think about pronouns. How long has that kind of been at play? And I think neopronouns, I don't have the history books right in front of me, but if I remember correctly, neopronouns have been around since, at least in literature and academics since the 60s and 70s, right? And have come kind of more into the wider cultural landscape in the 80s and 90s. So, excuse me. When we think about the way that we currently use pronouns, we see it hitting kind of the cultural zeitgeist, I don't know, in the past 15 years or so. I would say that pronouns like they, them, or the use of, gender neutral pronouns or pronouns that are not he, his, and she, her have really kind of hit the public, understanding or the public consciousness in the past 10 to 15 years. There's a deeper engagement with them on a cultural level now. I mean, we have gender neutral characters in books now, openly. We've had them for a while, but we now have openly characters who use they, them pronouns instead of just hinting at how a character is dressed, right? We have characters in TV shows that are openly identified with they, them pronouns. So this is not something you can point to seeing even 10 years ago in popular media and popular culture. So things have drastically changed. And that is a response to, this is, the idea of gender and gender fluidity being something that culture is picking up on a little bit more. Now, with the joy of finally being able to play with these identities in media and play with these identities in language and books and movies and TV shows, the joy of seeing characters like that comes pushback. right? We have anti-trans legislation. We have plenty of people who refuse to use gender-neutral pronouns. We have kind of the push and pull that happens with any kind of socially forward idea, even though who an individual is and what their identity is not socially forward. It just is, right? So in one sense, yes, our current understanding of the use of pronouns, how we engage with individuals, an understanding or an awareness around pronouns is relatively new, but identities, gender fluidity, transgender identified individuals, gender neutral identified individuals have existed, and language around this has existed since the dawn of time. And it's important for me to say that in spaces like this, because I feel like there is a social understanding or misconception that trans people are new, and they're not new.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's good. Thank you. I'm glad you did mention that, because this is what this podcast is about, is bringing awareness. And so you did that right there. When I think about the elderly community of the LGBTQ plus, when we talk about safe spaces, if let's just say if someone were going into a store, a company, any kind of organization, is there a way to know that that is a safe space for them? And I want you to answer that based on if they are showing uh, um, the pride flag, or if they are showing gender neutrality, symbols, if they are showing pronouns, and that's kind of, you can see that if you go to a website, or if it's a storefront, a physical location. And I want you to speak to it if that in and of itself renders that place safe, versus there's none of that, but it could be and is a safe space. How do you make that distinction? And especially for our elders who may or may not participate in this kind of movement.
Sure. So there's a couple of things I look for when I'm working with an organization to see kind of if their heart is in the right place, That's the way I like to frame it. But there's a couple of things I look for. When on the surface, I'm looking for just those indicators that you mentioned, right? It means that there's an awareness of the community, at least, if nothing else, right? And the other thing is that people think it's an easy act to put a pride flag on your website, or to use pronouns, or to have pronouns on your lapel pins, or whatever it is. Folks think that, oh, that's low-hanging fruit. That's the easiest thing you can do. But with these larger organizations, or with these caregiving organizations, there's a couple of things they're working against. One, all of their staff members may not be on board, right? So it's a conversation that they have to have with staff members to ensure that they're actually creating a space where folks can wave the flag and wear the pins and their staff members cannot be harassed, right? That's number one. Number two is care recipients, especially if it's a residential care community. Care recipients may have a problem with it. So there's education that has to happen in order to openly do this. And number three is the organization or the company had to have a conversation and say, there are people who are going to see the pride flag and who are not going to want to take advantage of our services because of it, right? And when we think about the fact that a lot of residential care communities, a lot of our care communities or care companies have their roots in religiously based organizations, right? So much of the elder care industry before it was corporatized started in faith communities. And so these organizations that have their deep roots in origin stories in faith communities have to say, okay, there are people who are going to take a look at this, maybe people part of our faith community who are not going to want to receive care from us because we have the pride flag flying. And that's something we have to be okay with. So just putting the flag on your website or having the lapel pins or putting, sexual orientation and gender identity in your non-discrimination statement, even those have repercussions. So if I see those, then I say, okay, a company has had these conversations, or I'm assuming a company has had these conversations, right? And then the other thing I look for, I would argue the more important thing, is whether someone can hold a conversation with me about LGBTQ plus issues. Can they say the words? Can they use the letters? Can they tell me when's the last time they've been trained? Can I look at their HR policy and see something about, transitioning on staff, or something about, diversity and equity and their mission and values and goals? Can I take a look at their roles and responsibilities for residents and see misgendering as a part of, disrespecting someone? Can I see the integration of LGBTQ plus identified individuals into the policies and practices of the organization? And what I tell a lot of the companies I work with is that putting the pride flag on your website comes second. Even though it's low-hanging fruit, it's what you do number two. Number one is you put all of those policies and practices in place, both on the staff side and the resident side. And here's why. I, as an LGBTQ plus older adult, if I take a look at the website, and if I see that there's a pride flag, and if I see that there's, inclusion statements and things like that, I am a little more excited, and I may be a little bit more open, right? And then I go to the organization and I'm doing the intake and I let someone know that I'm LGBT, right? I've outed myself because they told me I can. But if they don't have the policies and practices in place to protect me, they're putting me in danger. And so I tell all of the companies I work with that asking inclusive intake questions and putting that material on your website, all of those things come second. Internally changing policies and practices, training your staff, making sure your staff is aware and accepting and inclusive. All of those things come first, because you have to build those safety nets before you tell someone that they can out themselves.
Oh my gosh, Sadia. That was exactly, I didn't know what you were going to say, but that's exactly what I wanted to make sure people were aware of. Oh my gosh, when you said that any symbolism makes me feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to let you know that I am an LGBTQ plus member. And now I could potentially be putting myself in danger if you're not even trained on how to handle me. Woo! That's so good. Guys, listen, I hope that this is that you're listening, not only to know how to be kind and gentle, not only with somebody who is an LGBTQ plus person, but just a human being. Like, people, we have to just show up for each other. We have to be there when we see, things happening to other people. If it's somebody who looks just like us or doesn't, we show up. We see people harming animals, and you have people who would risk their lives to come to the rescue of an animal, but would stand by and watch another human being attacked by another human. Like, how does that work? What are we talking about? What are we doing here? And so Oh man, this is really eye-opening. I hope that it's helping. And I'm going to end on something very controversial, and I know you can roll with me with on it. So here we go. Would you recommend having one of your, if you're in the LGBTQ community, you're elder, you're not married, you might have a long-term relationship, but it's not recognized, so that person could not be your next of kin, all the things we talked about earlier. Would you recommend, because of the society, we have to deal with the society we're in, not the one we wish we had. We don't have that yet. We're not there yet. So the one that we're in right now, would you recommend having one of your backups or one of your, even it could be a power of attorney who's in a third position, or just a beneficiary or someone who can make decisions on your behalf? Would you recommend having one of them who was not a part of the LGBTQ plus community? And if so, why? If not, why?
So I don't know that that is a question I can answer. And here's why. When you are giving control to an individual to make decisions for you, to be your voice, to be your heart, to be your brain, to be your hands and legs, it has to be based on personal connection. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know those personal connections thrive when individuals know one another's hearts. It doesn't matter their identities. It doesn't matter their relationship. None of that matters. What matters is, do you know me and do you love me? And do I know you and do I love you? And that blossoms no matter an individual's identity. So I think when someone is choosing a power of attorney or a backup or whatever the case may be, you choose it based on relationships, not based on identities.
Right. That's right. So you nailed that. And clearly we wouldn't put someone, just a random person, just because they fit into another box in this place. So I should have given that caveat that this is someone in your circle. Like this is someone in your circle, but is not a part of your community.
As an LGBTQ plus older adult, right? If I were to put myself in those shoes, I would choose someone. I'd be more inclined to choose someone in my close circle who's in the community, because it's only when you have lived it and live in it do you understand the ways that everything could go horribly wrong. But at the same time, the kind of brilliance and resilience that our community has. So I think what often happens in care spaces is that when an individual gets older, they're seen as no longer being able to make decisions for themselves, right? Their kind of individual agency is taken away. And with our LGBTQ plus older adults and many communities beyond that, but we're talking about this particular community, they have fought for every step they've been able to take, right? They have fought for every right, every freedom, and continue to fight. This is a group of individuals who grew up at a time when being LGBT was practically, if not completely, criminalized, when the healthcare industry considered being LGBT a psychological disorder, when the US government refused to recognize the HIV/AIDS epidemic, right? This is a group of individuals who have cared for themselves and their community and have become the experts on their care. And so when thinking about who is going to honor that, right? It can be anyone. If they're in your circle, then they understand you, hopefully, right? But when thinking about who can honor that as you move into a space where you can no longer make decisions for yourself, I'd be just marginally, just a hair inclined to put someone who's in the community as well, because I think it's when you've been in the community that you can understand what it's like to have lived that.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's brilliant. Sadia, I love talking with you and just getting educated more and more in the world that you are curating for the LGBTQ plus community, for yourself and for everybody else who's in it. It's just, it's an education. And, you know, you want to learn, you want to get better, you want to be able to navigate this world and not being, exclusive and excluding people because of your own ignorance about things, right? And I'm thinking from my point of view on the question I just asked you. I'm thinking of it from my lived experience, right? And that's why I wanted to hear from you. And the way you answered it, I loved how you answered that. And here's my lens really quickly. If I knew I was in a very racist area and I'm aging, and for whatever reasons I've ended up there, maybe it's a rural little town somewhere and it's super racist. Why I'm there, I don't know, but let's just say I'm there. The reason I would want someone, a white friend who has been a lifelong friend who I know loves me, I love them, but I would want them as my backup because they might be able to, because now they're part of my care team. So it wouldn't just be them alone making decisions, but they would be part of my care team. And you know what? I might have to send them in to get entree. Yeah, that's how I was thinking about it. But I love different perspectives. I love when people have different perspectives than me, because then I learn. Now, guess what? Now, when I think about that same scenario, I'm going to incorporate your perspective into my perspective, which was, I need somebody who can talk their talk, because they're not going to hear me. They're not going to respond to me. I'm going to get very bad levels of care. But if I send you in, door up for me, then they know that I have someone who's advocating for me that can talk their talk and walk their walk. So that was it. But man, this has been great, Sadia. Can you tell us what things you're working on there at Sage, or even personally, as you advance your mission for your community?
Yeah, so we are working on quite a bit. There's a lot of fun stuff happening at Sage Care. First, everybody should check out our website, www.sageusa.care. You can find a searchable database of Sage Care trained institutions and organizations in your area. These are folks we've worked with who have earned our credential and have done our training year after year. For a look at the Long-Term Care Equality Index, if you're thinking of long-term care communities, check out the lei.org. And then Sage Care is embarking on a journey to do some international work. So we'll be hitting up, we are currently working with organizations in Canada. We'll be headed to the UK and doing some work there. So a lot of exciting things on the horizon.
Very nice. Well, I'll definitely drop your contact information in the link below. And thank you so much for this wonderful discussion today.
So such a wonderful way to start the morning. I deeply appreciate it.
Thanks, Sadia. Take care.
You too.